Act 1. The night she saw too much. The rain came down like it had a grudge. Lena Marsh almost didn't take the alley. She told herself this later 100 times in 100 sleepless hours, that if she'd waited for the light to change, if she'd called a car, if she'd stayed in the gallery one more minute to listen to the owner pretend her paintings might sell, none of it would have happened. But she was tired, and she was cold, and the alley behind Halstead cut 4 blocks off the walk to her apartment. So she went. That was the whole crime of her life. She took a shortcut. She heard them before she saw them. 2 men, low voices, the kind of quiet that isn't calm, the kind that's a held breath. She stopped at the mouth of the alley, with rain dripping off the hood of her coat, and through the curtain of water, she saw 3 shapes under a dead street lamp. 1 man kneeling, 1 man standing over him, and a third off to the side, motionless, watching like he'd paid for a seat. "You don't have to do this," the kneeling man said. His voice broke on this. "Tomas, tell him it doesn't have to." The standing man lifted his arm. There was no speech, no movie monologue, none of the things Lena would have expected. There was a sound like a door slamming in an empty house, and a flash that printed itself onto the back of her eyes, and the kneeling man folded sideways into a puddle that bloomed black. Lena's body made the decision before her mind did. She gasped. 3 heads turned. For one impossible second, she saw all of them, the dead man's face slack against the wet asphalt, the third man stepping back into shadow, and the shooter turning toward her under the lamp. She would spend months trying to forget that face, and fail. Sharp jaw, dark eyes, rain running off black hair, a stillness in him that was somehow worse than rage. He looked at her the way a man looks at a problem he already knows the solution to. She ran. She ran the way prey runs, blind and stupid and fast, her boots skidding on the slick, her lungs burning, the city smearing past in neon and rain. She didn't stop until she was inside her building, with the deadbolt thrown, and her back against the door, and her heart slamming so hard she thought she'd be sick. She slid down to the floor. She sat there, shaking until the sun came up, gray and indifferent, over the lake. By morning, it was everywhere. Brothers at war. Mob heir murdered in Chicago alley. The dead man had a name now, Mateo Vargas, 29. Younger brother of Tomas Vargas, the head of an organization the papers described with words like empire and bloodline and untouchable. And the man they wanted for the killing, the man the FBI had been chasing across 11 states for 2 years, the man whose face was now on every screen in America, was his own brother, Tomas Vargas, the man under the lamp. She knew his face. She would know it anywhere now. And somewhere, in a federal building downtown, a phone was already ringing with her name on the other end of it because a traffic camera at the mouth of that alley had caught a woman in a hooded coat freezing for 1 full second before she ran. She was the witness, the only one, the single human being on earth who could put Tomas Vargas in a courtroom and watch him go down. And she had never in her life been more certain she was going to die. The men came for her on the 3rd night, not the police. The police had called twice, gently a detective named Ruiz, with a voice like warm gravel, telling her she was safe, telling her they could protect her, telling her all the things people say right before they fail to do any of them. She hadn't called back. She'd painted instead. That was what her hands did when her mind couldn't hold itself together. And she'd painted the alley over and over, the lamp, the rain, the kneeling man, until her studio was full of versions of the worst moment of her life. And she understood she was losing her mind, one canvas at a time. The men who came on the 3rd night were not gentle. She heard the lock turn. Her lock. From the outside, smooth and professional. No kicking, no shouting. Just the quiet, mechanical certainty of people who do this for a living. She was already moving. Fire escape window. The cold steel of the railing under her palms, when a gloved hand closed over her wrist from above, and another came down out of the dark and pressed something soft and chemical over her face, and the city tilted, and the rain went sideways, and Lena Marsh went down into black. She woke up somewhere the sea was screaming. Act 2. The house on the cliff. The first thing she understood was the sound. It was enormous, a vast, ceaseless roar that filled the room and the walls and the inside of her skull, rising and falling, the breath of something far too large to fight. The sea. She was somewhere the sea threw itself against rock, day and night without ever winning, and without ever stopping. The second thing she understood was the bed. She was in it. A real bed. enormous, dark wood sheets that smelled of cedar, and something colder underneath. The room was beautiful in a way that frightened her. Vaulted ceilings, raw stone, a wall of glass, streaked silver with rain that looked out onto nothing but storm and black water, and the gray bones of a coastline that went on forever. No buildings, no lights, no other human thing for as far as the eye could reach. The third thing she understood was the man in the chair. He sat across the room in shadow, perfectly still, one ankle crossed over a knee, watching her, the way he'd watched the dead man in the alley, like she was a problem he'd already solved. The lamplight caught the edge of his jaw, the white of his shirt, the dark of his eyes. Tomas Vargas. Lena did not scream. Some animal part of her understood that screaming would change nothing, that there was no one to hear it but the sea, that the man across the room was the most dangerous human being in the country, and she was alone with him at the end of the world. She pressed herself back against the headboard and made her voice as steady as she could, and said the only thing in her, "Are you going to kill me?" He let the silence stretch. When he spoke, his voice was exactly as she remembered it from the news clips she'd been unable to stop watching. Low, unhurried, edged with something continental and cold. "If I wanted you dead, Miss Marsh," he said, "you'd have died in your apartment. The men who came for you weren't mine." "Then whose were they?" "That," he said, "is the only question that matters. And you're going to want to be alive long enough to learn the answer." He stood. She flinched. He noticed she saw him saw something flicker behind the cold and vanish, and he stopped where he was deliberately, the way you stop when you don't want a frightened animal to bolt. He was tall. He was broader than the screen had made him. There was blood, she realized, dried dark at his collar, not his, and a fresh cut along his knuckles. And the suit he wore had not been changed in some time. "You witnessed something 3 nights ago," he said, "and every man with a reason to want it buried now knows your name, your face, and where you sleep. The federal government wants you because they think you can convict me. Other people want you because they know you can't, because what you actually saw will hang the wrong man if they don't get to you first. You are, at this moment, the most valuable and most disposable person in America." He paused. "I brought you here because here is the only place on earth I can keep you breathing. You can hate me for it, most people do, but you will not leave this house because the moment you do, you're dead, and so is the truth." Lena stared at him. The sea screamed. The rain ran down the glass. "You're insane," she whispered. Frequently, Tomas Vargas agreed and left. The days bled into each other the way they do when there is no schedule but weather. The house was a fortress, disguised as a home. She figured that out slowly. Cameras she couldn't always see, doors that locked with no keyholes, a pantry stocked for a siege. 2 silent men who came and went by sea, never by road, who looked at Lena with the flat incuriosity of professionals and never once spoke to her. And Tomas, who appeared and vanished like the tide, who never raised his voice, who never touched her, who watched her constantly and pretended he didn't. She painted because she couldn't not paint. He found the supplies that was the strange thing, the thing she kept circling back to in her mind. On the 4th day, she'd said mostly to the window, mostly to herself, that she'd give anything for a brush. On the 5th day, a crate appeared by the glass wall. Canvases, oils, sable brushes, a palette knife, linseed oil, the good cadmium reds she could never afford, the cobalt she loved, everything. As if he'd watched her work in her studio, as if he'd memorized it. She didn't thank him. She painted the storm. On the 8th day, she tried to run. It was stupid, and she knew it was stupid even as she did it. But 8 days of being a beautiful prisoner had worn something raw in her, and when the silent men took the boat out at dawn and the house went quiet, she found a door she thought they'd forgotten, and a stretch of cliff path that looked in the gray light like it might lead to a road. She made it 400 yards into the wind before he caught her. He didn't grab her. That was the thing she'd remember. A man twice her strength, a man the whole country was afraid of, and he didn't lay a hand on her. He simply stepped into her path on the narrow cliff trail, with the sea falling away 100 feet below them, and he stood there in the rain, with his hands open at his sides, and let her see that there was nowhere to go. "There's a sensor every 40 meters, he said almost gently. "I knew you were on the path before you reached the gate. I let you walk because I wanted you to see it for yourself that there's nothing out here but water and weather and a fall that would kill you before Vale could. I'm not keeping you because I enjoy a cage, Lena. I'm keeping you because outside this rock You are a dead woman who simply hasn't been told yet. Then tell me how it ends, she shouted over the wind. Tell me how I ever get my life back. For a long moment he said nothing. The rain ran down both their faces. You may not get it back, he said finally, and the honesty of it was worse than any threat. I won't lie to you to make the cage feel smaller, but I will spend everything I have keeping you alive long enough to find out. That's all I can promise. That's all I've got. He turned and walked back toward the house, and did not look to see if she followed. She stood at the edge of the cliff in the rain for a long time, the whole gray country at her back, and the sea screaming below. And then she followed him in, not because she'd given up, because she'd believed him. That was the moment the fear started to turn into something else, and she didn't have a name for it yet, and the not having a name terrified her more than the cliff. She didn't thank him for that either. But that night she left the studio door open for the first time. He'd stand in the doorway sometimes and watch her work without a word, and she'd feel the weight of his eyes on the back of her neck, like a hand that never quite landed, and the not touching became its own kind of touch, louder than touching, unbearable, charged. One evening she turned and caught him looking at a canvas she'd left drying. The sea, the cliff, a single small figure standing at the edge of it, and his face had done something it never did in front of her. It had opened. For half a breath the cold cracked, and underneath it was something that looked impossibly like grief. "Who taught you to see like this?" he said. It wasn't a question. It was almost an accusation. "No one," she said. "I just looked." "That's worse," he said, and walked away. And she stood there with her heart pounding and paint drying on her hands, and the terrible dawning understanding that the most dangerous man in America had just paid her the most naked compliment of her life, and that she had wanted, in that moment, for him to come closer instead of leave. She hated herself for it. She painted that too. The truth came out on the night of the worst storm. The power died first. The lights stuttered and went black, and the generator caught somewhere below, and the house filled with the amber of emergency bulbs and candlelight, while outside, the sea threw itself at the cliff like it meant to climb up and take them. Lena found Tomas in the great room with a bottle of something dark and 2 glasses, and a look on his face she hadn't seen before. He'd poured the second glass already. He'd been waiting for her. "Sit," he said, then quieter. "Please." She sat. "You think I killed him?" Tomas said. He turned the glass in his hand and watched the candlelight move through it. "My brother. You saw it. You saw a man stand over Mateo and put a bullet in him, and you saw my face, and your eyes are very good, Lena. Better than any camera. You're certain. I can see it. You've been certain since the moment you woke up in my house." "I saw you," she said. "You saw me arrive," he said. And he looked up, and the cold was gone, and what was left was a man so tired he could barely hold himself upright. "I came to that alley to pull my brother out of it. Mateo had agreed to testify. Not against me, against the man who spent 2 years feeding the FBI a story where I'm the monster. A man named Adrian Vale. Mateo found something Vale couldn't let live, and Vale put him on his knees in the rain to make a lesson of it, and I got there 60 seconds too late. His voice did not break. That was the worst part. It stayed perfectly level, the way a thing stays level right before it falls. The shot you heard, the face you saw under the lamp, that was me, running toward my brother as he died. The man who pulled the trigger was already in the dark. You looked at the wrong face, Lena. You looked at the brother who came to save him." The room was very quiet under the noise of the sea. "Then prove it," she said. "Go to the police. Tell them. Tell them about Vale. Tell them." "With what witness?" Tomas said softly. And there it was. She felt the trap close around both of them in the same instant, cold and total. "You," he said. "You're the only living person who was in that alley. The moment I clear my name, I have to produce the night. I have to produce you. And the second Adrian Vale learns there's a witness who can place his face at the scene instead of mine. The second I tell the world the truth, you stop being useful to anyone and start being a loose end with a heartbeat. He will find you in a federal safe house. He will find you in Witsec in Montana. He has found people in places you can't imagine. The only way I walk free is over your body, Lena. So I don't walk free." He set the glass down. "I let the country believe I murdered my own brother, because the alternative is letting them bury you. That's the arithmetic. That's the whole of it. I would rather be the most hated man in America than the reason you stop breathing." Lena couldn't speak. Outside the glass, the storm tore the sky apart. Inside, a man she had been certain was a killer had just told her he was choosing to be hated, choosing to be hunted, choosing prison, or worse, to keep a stranger alive. Why? She finally managed. Why me? You don't even know me. He looked at her for a long, long moment. The candle guttered between them. I knew you the first time I saw your paintings, he said, before I ever saw your face. I knew you the way you know a window's open in another room because of how the light moves. You see people, Lena. You saw a man die, and you painted the rain instead of the blood, because you understood the rain was the part that mattered. Do you have any idea how long it's been since someone looked at the world that way near me? His jaw tightened. I don't have a softer answer than that. I wish I did. It would be easier for both of us. She should have been afraid. She was afraid. But underneath the fear, traitorous and bright and impossible, something else had taken root, and she knew with a sick certainty that it had been growing for days by the rain-streaked window, in the weight of his eyes on the back of her neck, and that it was the most dangerous thing in the house, more dangerous than Vale, more dangerous than the sea. Tomas stood. For one moment he was close enough that she could feel the heat of him, smell the salt and smoke and cedar of him, see the pulse in his throat. His hand lifted slowly, the way you reach toward something you're not allowed to have, and stopped a breath from her face. He didn't touch her. "Good night, Lena," he said roughly, and his hand dropped and he was gone into the dark of the house, and she sat alone with two glasses, one of them untouched, and understood that she had just fallen in love with the most dangerous man in America, and that it was going to get one or both of them killed. Act 3. The things they couldn't say. After that, the not touching became a war. They orbited each other through the long gray days like two bodies that had learned the exact distance at which they could survive. He taught her the house where the cameras watched, and where they didn't, how the panic doors worked, where the second boat was hidden in the sea cave below the cliff. In case the day comes that I'm not here. She didn't ask what day. She didn't want the answer. She taught him without meaning to, how to be a person again. It happened in pieces. He started taking his coffee where she painted, in the cold morning light, not speaking, just present. She started leaving the studio door open. One afternoon the rain broke for the first time in a week, and the sun came through the glass in a long gold blade, and she laughed at nothing, at the simple animal relief of warmth, and she caught him watching her with an expression so undefended it stopped her breath. He looked like a man who had found water after deciding to die of thirst. "What?" she said. "Nothing," he said. "Keep doing that." "Laughing, being alive," he said. "In front of me. It's been a long time since anything was." She crossed the room before she could think better of it. She stood close, too close, the war's forbidden distance, broken on purpose, and she lifted her paint-stained hand and laid it flat against his chest, over the place where his heart was beating much too fast for a man so cold, and she felt it slam against her palm, like something trying to get out. "Tomas," she said. "Don't," he said. His voice was wrecked. "Lena, don't. If you do this, I won't be able to keep you at the distance that keeps you safe. I'll want you near me, and near me gets you killed. Do you understand? Everything I love, Vale takes. That's how he's built. I am the worst thing that could ever happen to you, and the only thing standing between you and the worst thing that could ever happen to you at the same time. I can't be both. I can't." She kissed him. It was nothing like she'd imagined, and exactly like she'd imagined. For one frozen heartbeat, he held himself still, fighting it, fighting himself, every line of his body, rigid with the discipline of a man who had spent 2 years denying himself the right to want anything. And then the discipline broke, all at once, like the storm breaking, and his arms came around her hard enough to lift her off the floor, and he kissed her back like a man who had been drowning quietly for a very long time, and had just been told he was allowed to breathe. When they broke apart, he pressed his forehead to hers, both of them shaking, and he said very quietly, "This is going to be the thing that destroys me, and I don't care. God help me, I don't care." "Then don't," Lena whispered. "Don't keep me at a distance. Keep me. I'm trying to keep you alive." "Do both," she said. "I dare you." He laughed, actually laughed, a broken, astonished sound the first she'd ever heard from him, and held her like the sea was coming for them both. The peace lasted 4 days. On the 5th, a man came up the cliff road who shouldn't have been able to. He came alone, in a gray car, under a white flag of plausible deniability. A lawyer, soft-handed, smiling, the kind of man Adrian Vale sent when he wanted you to understand he could reach you without raising his voice. Tomas met him at the gate and did not let him past it. And Lena watched from the broken angle of an upstairs window as the two men stood in the wind and the lawyer talked, and Tomas went very, very still. He came back into the house with his jaw set like stone.
"What did he want?"
Lena said. "You," Tomas said. He wouldn't look at her. "Vale's made an offer. He knows there's a witness. He doesn't know it's you, not yet, not for certain, but he knows I'm protecting someone, and he knows me well enough to guess what that means." His voice was low and even, and underneath it ran something she'd never heard in him before, something molten. "He offered me my name back, my freedom, the whole story rewritten with me as the hero, and Mateo's killer named at last. All of it, everything I bled for, in exchange for one address, yours." The room tilted under her. "And you said—" "I put his lawyer back in his car and told him that if Adrian Vale ever sends another man up that road, I'll send back something he'll have to bury in pieces." Tomas turned to face her at last, and his eyes were black and terrible and absolutely certain, and for one moment she saw exactly why entire cities whispered his name. "He thinks I'll trade you for my life, because that's what he would do. He's measuring me with his own ruler. He doesn't understand that you stopped being a witness to me somewhere around the 4th day, and he is about to learn the difference the hard way." "Tomas," she whispered, "you could have your whole life back. You could be free." "I am free," he said. "For the first time in my life. The cage was never this house, Lena. The cage was every year before you walked into it." He crossed the room and took her face in both hands, and there was nothing cold left in him at all. "Let him keep my name. I don't want it back if the price is you. Let me be the monster. I'll be a monster who has you instead of a free man who doesn't. That math has never once been hard for me. Not once." She kissed him then, hard, terrified, furious at him for being willing to throw away the only thing he'd wanted for 2 years. And underneath the fury, undone by it, because no one had ever chosen her over anything, let alone over everything. And outside, far down the dark coast, the gray car reached the highway, and a phone call was made, and headlights she did not see began to turn, because Adrian Vale had just learned from one offer, refused too fast, that the witness Thomas Vargas was hiding wasn't a witness at all anymore. She was the one thing the most dangerous man in America wouldn't trade, which made her the one thing worth taking. Vale had found the house because of a painting. That was the part Tomas pieced together too late. It was such a small thing. The gallery owner in Chicago, the one who'd never sold a single canvas of hers, who'd pretended her work might matter, had hung one of Lena's storm paintings in his window after she vanished, with a little card, "Missing artist. Information welcome." He'd meant it kindly. He'd meant it as a flare into the dark for a woman he was afraid was dead. But Adrian Vale had men who looked at everything, and one of them recognized the cliff in the brushstrokes, a specific cliff, a specific ruin of coastline that existed in exactly one place on the map. That was how the gray car had found the road. That was how the lawyer had come smiling to the gate. And when Tomas put the lawyer back in his car too fast, Vale had his answer. The witness was no longer a witness. She was leverage. And leverage you don't negotiate for. Leverage you take. The assault came the next night. The first Lena knew of it was Thomas going very still in the middle of a sentence, his eyes on a phone that had buzzed once. The cold came back over his face like a door closing. But underneath it now, she could read what she'd never been able to read before, because she knew him now. Fear, not for himself. He had never once been afraid for himself. "How long?" she said. 20 minutes, he said. "Maybe less. Get your coat." The house went dark and silent and lethal, in a way she'd never seen Tomas moving through it, like a different creature entirely. The boss, the papers wrote, about the man whole cities were afraid of, fast and quiet and absolute. He pressed a thick envelope into her hands. Money, a passport with her photograph and a name that wasn't hers, a key, the boat in the cave. "If we're separated, you take it south along the coast. You don't stop. You don't trust anyone. You call the number inside and you say the word, lighthouse, and you do exactly what the voice tells you. Promise me." "Tomas, promise me." "I promise," she said, and hated the promise because she understood it was a promise to leave him behind. They almost made the stairs to the cave. The window exploded inward. Tomas had her on the floor before the glass finished falling, his whole body over hers, a wall of him. His hand clamped over her mouth and his eyes on hers saying, "Don't make a sound," while above them, the headlights of 3 black SUVs swept across the ceiling, and men poured out into the storm, and the sea screamed and screamed and screamed. She felt him take a hit, felt his body jerk, felt the warm spread of it soak through his shirt against her back. And he didn't make a sound either, just pressed her down harder, just kept his eyes on hers, just breathed, "Stay with me." Against her ear, what happened next, she would never be able to fully describe afterward. To anyone the dark the muzzle flash, strobing the rain-silver walls. Tomas, moving her ahead of him through the house, one room at a time, with a calm that was somehow more terrifying than panic. The two silent men, appearing from nowhere, to buy them seconds with their lives. The cold concrete of the stairs down into the cave, the smell of salt and gun smoke. The boat. He got her into the boat. His shirt was black with blood. He got her into the boat, and his hands were steady, and his voice was steady, and that was how she knew how bad it was, because nothing in the world was steady anymore, except him. "Go," he said. "You're coming with me," Lena said. She was crying and she didn't know it. "Tomas, get in the boat." "They'll follow the boat," he said. "They won't follow it if I'm still in the house. I'll give you the water. I'll give you the dark." He cupped her face in one bloody hand, gentle as he had never let himself be gentle. And he looked at her like he was painting her now, like he was trying to keep her, all of her, against whatever came next. "I told you I'd be the thing that destroyed you. I lied. Letting you go is the thing that destroys me. Remember that I chose it. Remember I chose you. Now go and live, and paint the rain, paint the part that matters." "No," Lena said. "No, not like this. Get in the boat or I don't go." And here is the thing about a woman who sees people she had spent weeks learning him. She knew where his eyes went when he lied. She knew the difference between his calm and his peace. And she looked at this man bleeding out at the edge of the sea, this man who had chosen to be the most hated person in America, rather than let her die. This man telling her with perfect steadiness to leave him behind. And she saw underneath the steadiness, the truth she'd learned to read. He didn't want to die. He just decided he was allowed to, if it bought her the dark. "I'm not the kind of person Vale takes from you," she said fast, low, fierce, gripping the front of his ruined shirt with both fists. "Because you're not going to lose me. We're going to lose him. Together. You don't get to be a martyr, Tomas. You get to be a witness. My witness. The one who corroborates everything. The one who survived with me. But only if you get in the boat." For 1 second, the most dangerous man in America stared at the painter who had walked into his life through the wrong alley. Then above them, footsteps on the stairs. He got in the boat. Act 4. The storm and after. They went out into the open sea in the worst of it, the little engines screaming, the swell's black mountains rising and falling, the cliff and its burning windows shrinking behind them into the rain. Lena drove because Tomas's hands had finally stopped being steady. She packed his shoulder with a folded jacket and his belt cinched above the wound, and she screamed the word "lighthouse" into a phone with salt water running down her face, and a voice on the other end told her exactly what to do, and she did it, because she had promised, and because for the first time in her life, there was something in the world she was not willing to lose. He didn't die. She'd like to say she always knew he wouldn't, but that would be a lie, and she'd stopped lying to herself somewhere out on that black water. He lost a great deal of blood, and an argument with a surgeon about painkillers, and most of his certainty that he deserved to live. And on the third day, in a safe room that smelled of antiseptic and the sea, he opened his eyes and found her asleep in a chair beside him, with paint still under her fingernails, and he watched her breathe for a long time before he let her know he was awake. "You should have run," he said. "I did run," she said, not opening her eyes. "Once, through the wrong alley. Look how that turned out." She opened her eyes. "I'm done running, Tomas. Try and make me." The thing they did next was the most dangerous thing either of them had ever done. More dangerous than the cliff, more dangerous than the sea. They told the truth, not to Adrian Vale. Vale, they handled another way, the way men like Vale are handled, with the patience Tomas had learned over a lifetime, and the one weapon Vale had never accounted for, a witness who could place his face in that alley, and a man finally willing to stand beside her in the light to say so. They went to the one federal agent Tomas had spent 2 years deciding he could trust and never quite risking it, Detective Ruiz, of the warm gravel voice. And Lena sat across a steel table and told the whole of it, the rain, the lamp, the kneeling man, and the face. Not the face the cameras assumed, the other face, the man already in the dark, She had painted it 100 times without knowing why. Every version of the alley, with the same shadow at the edge of it, the same sharp line of a jaw she'd never consciously seen. She'd been painting Adrian Vale for weeks. She just hadn't known his name. It is a long story what came after. Longer than a night, longer than a season. Adrian Vale did not go quietly, and powerful men with the law on their side never do. There were months when Lena and Tomas lived behind other names, in other cities, when the only certainty in either of their lives was the other one's heartbeat in the dark. There were nights he woke up reaching for a wall to throw between her and the world that wasn't there anymore. And she'd take his hand and put it flat against her chest over her heart, and say, still here, feel it, until the steadiness came back into him. There were mornings she painted by whatever window they had, and he brought her coffee and stood at her shoulder and learned, slowly, in pieces, that he was allowed to want something and keep it. Vale fell in the end the way the powerful always fall, not all at once, but completely. Mateo's evidence, which Tomas had carried like a wound for 2 years, finally had a living witness to make it mean something. The story the country had believed, the brother who murdered his brother, turned out to be exactly that, a story, told by the man who'd needed it told. When it was finished, when the verdict came down on the right man, and the warrants on Tomas Vargas were quietly, complicatedly, never quite publicly set aside, there was a strange flat afternoon where they sat together and realized they had run out of things to run from. "You're free," Lena said. "I don't know what that is," Tomas said honestly. "Neither do I," she said. "Let's find out slowly. We're good at slow." They went back to the cliff. The house was a ruin, the windows gone, the great room scorched, the sea 3 months into the work of reclaiming it, but the bones of it stood, raw stone against raw sky. And the storm had finally, for the first time since she'd known the place, blown itself out. The water below was almost calm. The light came in long and gold and forgiving, through the empty frames where the glass had been. Lena set up an easel in the wreck of the room where she'd first painted the storm. She mixed cadmium red and cobalt and the white of the morning. And Tomas Vargas, the man whole cities had feared, the man who'd chosen to be hated, the man who had stood between her and the headlights with his own body and his own blood, sat in a chair in the ruin of his fortress and watched her work in the gold light, undefended, alive, hers. "What are you painting?" he asked. He already knew not to expect the blood. She turned the canvas so he could see it, the cliff, the sea finally quiet, and at the edge of it, small against all that sky, 2 figures this time. Not one. "The part that matters," she said. He crossed the room. He did not stop a breath from her face the way he used to, the war over now, the distance gone. He took her paint-stained hand and turned it over and pressed his mouth to her open palm. And then he pulled her in against the wreckage of his chest, where his heart was still beating much too fast, and he held her in the gold light, while below them, the sea, for once, for the first time, finally, was silent. "Stay," he said. It wasn't a command. The most dangerous man in America had run out of commands. It was the closest thing to a prayer she'd ever heard him make. "I never left," Lena said. "You're the one who kept trying to send me away. Stop doing that." "I will," he said. "I'm done. I'm done sending you anywhere." And he kissed her in the ruins of the house on the cliff, with the storm gone out of the sky and out of him at last. And somewhere far away, the city went on being afraid of his name, never knowing that the most feared man in America was at that exact moment completely and finally and forever undone by a painter who'd taken the wrong alley and seen the right thing and refused against every reasonable instinct to run. She'd painted the rain because the rain was the part that mattered. It turned out he was too.